Did you see what YouTube sent us?
No. Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
100 subscribers.
Amazing.
We technically have 156, and shout out to all 156. But yeah, we got a plaque.
That's nice. They must have upgraded like the more people you get from cardboard to like plastic and then metal and that kind of thing.
So I think they ran out because of the shortage, but it's nice to be recognized.
Well, you know what it probably was? Probably they don't have any more because so many people did stuff during COVID that,
True.
here we are.
Yeah.
Everybody was doing their thing.
But there was a little note inside that said sometimes the best recognition is the recognition you give yourself.
That smells like crap to me, but okay.
Welcome, boys and girls, to the Sanctum Sanctorum podcast, where comics and Christ culture collide. I am player one, Joey.
And I am Ready Player 2, Chris.
Look at you. Welcome to yet another episode where we discuss some of our favorite comic book movies, the Christ culture within them, the good things, the bad things, and everything in between. Chris, how are you?
I am doing great. I can't tell you how excited I am to do today's movie. It is such a great movie. It is one of my favorite movies, and it takes place in Canada. And my dad's family is from Canada, so I got that Canadian blood running through my veins. So,
I do not.
take off your hoser and all that.
I have it adjacent because my sister married a Canadian. They're up in Canada. Shout out to all our Canadian listeners because we know you're up there. We know you're freezing your Rastafarian nays off, and we support you, but it's a little bit warmer in New Jersey.
Make sure you wear your toques, you hosers, and all that. You're wearing a toque. I'm wearing a toque. That's what they call beanies.
Well, it is cold today.
Oh,
but before we dive into our movie of the day, we have a comic culture moment that I'd love to discuss with you. Chris, should comics primarily entertain us, or do they have a responsibility to make a social commentary on the things that are going on, like inequality, relationships, corruption, you name it? Should comics be the voice that highlights these things, or should they stay in their lane and simply entertain us? What do you think?
Well, I think that it is not so easy a question as just, yes, they should, no, they shouldn't. I was thinking about this a lot yesterday. I think that it's important for comic books to acknowledge real world situations, but where I again, like with so many of these questions we talk about, is where do you draw the line? So, a lot of comic books did a tribute when 9/11 happened.
Right.
Both Marvel and DC did an acknowledgement of first responders. They didn't, Marvel, especially because most of the heroes there are based in New York, acknowledged, them going and helping and helping find survivors and helping clear the rubble and all that kind of stuff. And I think that was great. I think it was very moving. I think it was a way for the comic book industry to respond to such a major tragic event. But is it the comic book's job to respond to everything like that? I don't know. I think it can be important. The X-Men were a representative of racism, and later the LGBTQ community of, they represented kind of the other. And I think it was important to have that story of like, here's what we see in the world. Now here's kind of a fantastical view of it, but here's something we see in the world. I don't know that it's their responsibility, but I think that it's a medium through which people can find understanding and through which the artists and storytellers can express their understanding of things going on in the world around us.
Yeah, I was thinking about it too. I think good art reflects life, and it has to say something about it. To not is just to be obtuse, right? Like when it doesn't, it becomes just this echo chamber of its own thing, and it doesn't resonate with the audience. It doesn't connect with their experiences. So there does need to be that tangential awareness. But that said, I really came down to this idea of what is the primary focus of entertainment. And when it becomes the art's cross to bear, like, is it really your job to make sure that you're saying everything about everything all the time? Maybe, maybe not, to your point. But I think that when it loses its focus, when you're no longer pushing character narrative because you're trying to say something, that's when we lose it. I think social commentary is great. One of my favorite movies is Get Out, the horror movie from Jordan Peele, right? That discusses systemic racism. That's what that movie's about, right? Like, but it does it in a way that actually contains it within this story.
Right.
So if you wanted to just contain something within a single story, that's one thing. But comics have a storyline, and there's different characters that come in and out. And so if you're sacrificing and compromising the main objective, which is to push story down, just so now you can address all the social issues of the day, I think that's where we get into issues. A good example of this is my personal opinion, and I'll stand by it. I felt like the Eternals movie was more focused on having a DEI LGBTQ message than making a good movie. Now, it's not that those things are bad. In fact, they're important. Representation is very important, and I'm glad that it's there. But I felt like the story suffered because we were more focused on those things.
Yes, 100%.
A great example of the inverse is WandaVision. WandaVision is completely about grief. Completely, utterly. Nobody's going to question that this beautiful cinematic experience is all about a character's journey through grief, but it pushes the character along, and you felt like you went on a journey. So it doesn't sacrifice the main intention, which is how do we get a character from point A to point B? And those themes are very clear, but it's contained within the goal. So I think if you're sacrificing the main intention, which is entertainment and story development, just so you can say something, that's the issue.
I would agree with that, but also to kind of play devil's advocate a little bit, I think that we look at media entertainment, so comics, books, movies, TV, video games, as an escape from real life. Sometimes, it's like, my work day was hard, my family life is hard, my relationship is hard, my school is hard, whatever. Let me turn my brain off and just read about Spider-Man and Batman. Let me watch a horror movie or an action movie about an adventure.
Yeah.
And so I think that it needs to have that element as well of being an escape, because if it's like during COVID, one of the things I loved to do was to be able to shut off the news and the social media and everything about all the fear and the anger and the the grief. Was let's watch a movie, let's find a show to watch. But then as these shows start incorporating that, as these books and movies start incorporating COVID into their storytelling, it's important because it was a major moment in history. It's something that we all experienced, and it is like time stamped as a thing that happened.
Sure.
So it has to be in there to a degree, but also I don't necessarily want to read about something I'm experiencing through the eyes of these characters that I'm reading about or watching or whatever. So I think that you need to balance living in the real world while also still being an escape for your audience from the what can be perceived as like the horrors of real life.
And there's a fine line with that, right? Like the thing you just pointed out, I remember when Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the TV series on Disney Plus, was coming out, there was a whole thread line that this entire narrative was contingent on, which was the outbreak of a worldwide disease. And this was planned in 2019. And then as COVID happened, they were like, that's a little insensitive and it's a little too on the nose. Let's take that out and rewrite the whole thing. So then the story actually suffered because they were having to react to real life events.
Because what's funny is that with Endgame, it took place 5 years later between 2018 and 2023 in the story. And so they completely bypassed the, 3.5 years of major COVID stuff, which was crazy.
Right. But I thought they did it well. I thought they removed it, and the story, it struggled a little bit. It limped. It didn't really land well, but it was enough to say, okay, we can pivot and not be tonally insensitive to our cultural awareness. At the same time, you can't not, like, that's just such a random thing, right? Like, there's no way they could have known, oh, this is going to happen, therefore we should make our story about it. Mm. That's just a thing that could have been a good narrative vehicle.
Right.
But you also have to have enough wiggle room within these stories and a very clear, definitive vision for where you're taking these characters so that life happens in the real world and you still provide that escape like you're talking about within these mediums.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think, again, like with so many of these things, balance is the main focus that you have to have. Like, yes, these characters should live in the world that we live in, but also we want these worlds to be fantastical. I don't want Middle Earth to suffer from COVID. You know what I mean? Does Gotham City need to have an attack on it the way that New York did? Maybe not, because sometimes I want that to escape from the horror of real life. So I think you need to find a balance.
You got to watch out for that Hobbit 19.
Yes, Hobbit 19. It's a plague on the rest of us. But listeners, what do you think? Do you think that it's the responsibility of our media, our pop culture media, to explain the world around us and to comment on social situations and represent everything? Or is it meant to be just an escape? Is it meant to be fun? Should they? Shouldn't they? We want to know what you think. Comment on our Facebook, on our Instagram, on our YouTube. Please let us know what you think and whether we're right or wrong or naive or brilliant. It's probably brilliant.
Or other.
Or other.
All right, player two. You ready to go head to head in this plot synopsis?
Oh, I can't wait for you to finish him.
Finish him. Like we said, we are covering 2010's Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I actually don't know if we've said it.
I was just going to say, did we actually say it? I don't know. We are covering Scott Pilgrim versus the World, based on Brian Lee O'Malley's incredible manga series, of which there are 6 books and of which you should absolutely go out, read them, enjoy them. They are one of the best comic books I've ever read. They're amazing.
You ready for this plot synopsis?
Hit me. Let's do it. Level 1.
Cue that level 1 music. Here we go. Meet Scott Pilgrim, a stereotypical hipster man boy who lives across the street from his parents, is an unemployed musician, and literally complains about everything. He meets Ramona Flowers, an emotionally complex goth girl with hair like a mood ring. Scott wins her, but to keep her, he must kill people. Literally. Through levels of amazing fight sequences, stunning gaming graphics, and a punk rock playlist, Scott must defeat Ramona's 7 deadly exes to win the game of love. Oh, and he needs to cheat on a minor to do this. A sentence I never thought I'd say on this podcast.
Yeah.
Get your arcade tokens ready to learn a lesson about being violent, being jealous, and how to chase after a toxic relationship even when a good one is staring at you right in the face. In 2010's Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Dun, dun, dun.
That was maybe my favorite plot synopsis thus far. That was a really, really good one. Really good one. A man boy. Yeah, that's a great way to put him.
Oh, he's such a man boy.
Scott is definitely a man boy.
Yeah, we're covering this movie. This movie's got everybody in it.
Yeah, well, so it was directed by Edgar Wright, who is, known for having done the 3 Flavors Cornetto trilogy.
Yep.
and a host of other stuff. He's got a very distinct style. But yeah, I mean, you got
Almost did
so many.
Ant-Man.
So this close to Ant-Man would have been such an amazing movie.
And what's interesting too is when you know Edgar Wright movies, you see his influence in Ant-Man, even though he didn't direct it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he definitely, you could tell that he started some of it.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, this movie stars not only so many actors that, went on to do more things, but so many comic book actors that went on to do great stuff in comics. Chris
Yeah.
Evans is in this, who went on to Fantastic Four and the MCU as Captain America. Brandon Routh, who was Superman. Brie Larson, who was Captain Marvel. Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who was Huntress. So many. Jason Schwartzman, who was the Spot in the Into the Spider-Verse. So many people who have superhero comic book connections, all in this quirky little video game movie. A lot of fun.
Great. It's great. And now I've never seen it before. Watching it was my first experience into this. And so you've got a comic awareness of this and you love the movie. I walked into it fresh. And so we are on level 2 now. Let's talk about some good stuff. What did you like about this movie? Besides the everything.
Honestly, what didn't I like about this movie? I tried to nail it down to some very specific thing. I mean, we talked about all the people in this movie. The casting is phenomenal.
Amen.
I don't have a problem with just about anybody.
I have a problem with one, but we'll get to that.
I have one, so we'll get to that. But
right.
For the most part, the casting is spot on, and all of the original cast members went on to do the Netflix series. Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. They all came back to do the voices of the characters.
Very cool.
Which is kind of an alternate retelling of Scott Pilgrim. So basically, it's the same up until the fight with Matthew Patel, and it's what would have happened if Scott lost that fight.
Interesting.
And how the characters went on a different journey. So that's pretty cool. If you want to check that out, it's on Netflix.
What's cool about this too is I've watched some of the interviews, like, when actors break down their most famous roles. I've watched Michael Cera. I've watched Chris Evans. They both have the exact same thing to say about this movie, which was, this was the most fun we've ever had on a film. And they revisited the script during COVID, and they read through it, like all the actors. I watched the whole hour and a half. It was brilliant. And you can tell, not just because of the interview, but in the movie, they are having so much fun. And that makes me have so much fun.
Well, because everybody just chews the scenery. This was such a weird, quirky movie that they were able to just go full out. They didn't have to nobody took themselves too seriously. Everybody was having a good time, and they were just all in on these characters. And in any other movie, you would have looked at just about everybody and been like, all right, they were way over the top, or that was a little too funky and getting weird. Everybody was just... and you bought in from the beginning. You didn't even look as an audience and think that's too much. It was like, no, that's just right for this.
So I did at first. I was like, what is going on? It took me about 5 minutes to realize what world we were in. Once I realized what world we're in, then I'm like, oh, okay, now here we go. And then it was fine.
There are so many movies based on video games, and some are better than others, but for the most part, they're not great. This is the best video game movie not based on a video game. It's got all the hallmarks of a video game. You have, the power-ups, the extra life. You collect coins when you defeat a villain. There, is a health bar. That stuff is great. It's the best video game movie that wasn't ever based on a video game.
Well, and to that, this is one of my main things, because we can't really move beyond it until we talk about it. The graphics in this movie,
oh my God,
are unbelievable.
They're graphics are so much fun.
Whoever did them knows comics. They know, like, even this in the world of comic book movies, 2010, right? So X-Men have come out, Fantastic Four's come out. You've got some Spider-Man.
The MCU has just started.
Picked off, and Evans is already announced that he's going to be Captain America. But this thing says, we're not going to be what the MCU is becoming. We're going to be our own thing, and we're going to be incredibly grounded in comic look and feel, and they nail it. They nail it so well.
Mm-hmm. All the like when you have all the words that pop up when they say certain things, and if you look at the let me find a good page here. If you look quickly at the artwork here, you could tell that when some of the characters are telling, like when Ramona is telling some of her history, that's the art that they use.
Ripped
Is
right
they just
off.
pulled it right from it and put it right on the screen, and that was such a perfect choice.
Yep.
And along with the graphics, the action scenes, you wouldn't expect most of these people to be, action stars, at least not at the time. And everybody was believable. The action and fight scenes were so much fun because they were so over the top, so wacky. And again, everybody was fully committed to the bit, to the 8-bit.
Nice. You talk about being fully committed. That's a great way to put that. Like, I know because of the interview, like I mentioned, Chris Evans took skateboarding lessons, so he's really doing that. One of the other
Mhm.
things that I noticed and I absolutely loved, one of my pet peeves as a musician, and I'm sure you have this too. When you are watching a movie and you can tell that the musician is not really playing, it
Ugh.
drives me up a wall.
Or when what they're playing, is wrong.
And Cera is playing.
Hmm.
He is playing. I can't really tell if the drummer's doing the drumming or the other guitarist is doing his thing, but when Cera is playing the guitar, he is really playing.
Yep.
And I respected the crap out of that.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And it can be irritating, especially when you see they're not even trying. It's like
Yeah.
there are hits or notes that are like you're not even close to being correct.
Like the piano player's doing this. It's like, come on, you gotta
Oh,
you gotta try here.
there are tons of videos of people like showing the clip of something, and they're like, okay, so I broke down and I played exactly what they played on piano based on exactly what they played on guitar, and this is what it really sounded like. And it's like, ooh, that is not as good as it sounded in the movie.
No,
That
because
is
somebody
no
else
good.
did that.
That's very bad. Um, so since we were just talking about the fight scenes, I love that everybody seems confused, but everybody goes with it.
Hmm.
So, like, during the Battle of the Bands, the first fight, Matthew Patel shows up, crashes through the wall, claims he needs to fight Scott, and everybody looks like, what's going on? But nobody is questioning it. Everybody's just like, this is completely normal. It's Canada. Of course, this stuff happens.
Every
And I
day.
like that. Kim, who is the drummer in Sex Bomb, she's got amazing one-liners in general, but I also love when she announces the name of the band and then has something to say. Those are always nailing it. We are Sex Bomb and we're here to sell out and make money and stuff.
She's great.
Speaking of Michael Cera actually playing the bass battle that he does with Brandon Routh, so much fun.
It's brilliant. It's a
So much
brilliant
fun.
fight.
And then that leads into the Vegan Police
Yep.
with Thomas Jane, another comic book guy, making a
Punisher,
little
right?
cameo appearance. Punisher, yep,
Yep.
2004's Punisher. The fact that it takes place in Canada is just a beautiful thing. It would have been so easy for a quirky movie like this. You would think immediately it would be either New York or L.A., maybe even Jersey.
Well, it does sort of happen in New York since literally her entire life is like, oh yeah, I dated this guy in New York, and when I was in New York, and New York, New York, New York. Like
All
it's
right,
New York adjacent, but it's happening in Toronto.
right, but she's from America. They make it
Yeah,
clear that she's American. But I like that all the action takes place in Toronto. That's where
correct.
everybody else seems to be from, or at least traveling to.
Exactly.
It speaks very much to the awkwardness of relationships when you're that age. Our youngest character is 17 and our oldest character is, mid to late 20s.
Right.
And that time of life when you're, in relationships, friendships, romantic relationships, whatever, breakups, and the honeymoon phases and all that kind of stuff. That's a time of your life where you're still kind of figuring out who you are as a person, who you are as an adult, what you're looking for in a partner. And I think that this does a really good job of dealing with like the some of the it sits in the discomfort of that era of relationship. And I think that
Yeah.
that's really cool. It could be very easy to kind of brush that aside, but I think that that's really fun.
Well, and it spoke that very much to me. Like I've got this one really good thing, which will just piggyback on what you're saying. Like it is very dated, right? It's very very 2010,
Hmm.
and I didn't watch it at the time, but that is when I was, I was dating my wife at the time anyway. But it is still that uncertainty and that awkwardness, and we're at that point we were like a year into our relationship, and you're still trying to figure this out, and what are your motivations and what are mine and all of that, and I've been married 13 years now, but it brought me right back because of everything going on with it, because of the relationship dynamic, because of the soundtrack. It's very Perks of Being a Wallflower-esque. It's very much that. It's got
Hmm.
that very significant timestamp on it, which just brought me back to the headspace of that maturing phase. And I think it does that really well. I think anybody can sort of log on to that point in their life and be able to get to that headspace. And I thought that it did that really well.
It's almost like I know you said Perks of Being a Wallflower, but for me, it was very like if you took the movie Garden State and
Yep,
made it a
same thing.
video game. That's exactly what this is. It speaks to a time. Ramona is very manic pixie dream girl.
Mm-hmm.
Scott is socially awkward and doesn't know who he is or what he wants, and has trips over himself all the time. He's got the cool friend in Wallace and Steven Stills.
I would vote for Wallace to be prime minister.
Everybody needs a Wallace.
I need a
Everybody needs
Wallace.
a Wallace in their life.
I probably have one and I ignore him.
I love the names of a lot of these characters too. By the way, like
Yeah.
Knives Chow is a great name. Young Neil, Envy Adams.
Knives
Uh,
Chow. It's so great.
I just think the names of all these characters are Stephen Stills, Scott Pilgrim. They're all just very catchy names. Gideon Graves, very catchy names. They fit in the world.
Did you catch the Stills and the Neil reference?
Hmm.
That's Crosby,
Neil
Stills.
Stills, yeah.
Yeah. Well done.
I had a hard time finding too much specifically good because I love this movie so much that the whole thing is just great. But I think the other thing that I really love about this, and then we can move on to the stuff you have, is that this is a cult movie without trying to be,
Yep.
but it's also really accessible. Like some cult movies, like you need to be introduced by people that already accept it as a cult classic. You know what I mean? If you think about this your standard cult classic movies, probably the one that people think of the most is the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Sure.
If you discovered that movie completely on your own with no point of reference and watched it, you would probably think this is terrible and this is garbage. But if you're introduced by the people who are obsessed with it, the people who love it, the people who go to the midnight showings and dress up, it creates a different experience. My wife Marissa said this to me about wrestling. She always hated wrestling, but watching it with me gave it a different view
Hmm.
because I was able to explain like, oh, here are the characters, here's the callbacks, here's the story. So when you experience a form of art with someone who loves it, I think it can add to a different experience than just watching it cold. Something like this, something that can be very niche and something that's left of center and offbeat.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that about it. I think that makes it something really unique.
Well, to that point, you did that with me. Like I had no idea what this was. We said we would do it, and I had no concept of what this is, but like you were basically like my Jedi going, no, it's going to be great. You're going to be fine. Trust me. This is awesome. And sure enough, I had a great experience with it. I don't know if I would have done that if we hadn't talked about it.
And 5 minutes in, like, where has this movie been my whole life? Was I asleep for all of 2010? Yeah.
It was good.
The real last thing. Can we talk about the music?
Yeah.
The needle drops
We
were
have to.
terrific. I mean, some of our main characters are in different bands, and there is not one band that plays a bad song. The songs rock.
Bangers.
They have a very 2000s feel. They kind of have like they
White
remind me a little
Stripes.
bit of the Strokes, White Stripes.
The whole thing.
But they are the Clash at Demon Head, Sex Bomb, Crash and the Boys. Great band names also, but great music.
Yeah.
Just great music. The Scott Pilgrim soundtrack is a banger.
It is good.
All right, hit me.
I've got 3 things that you didn't cover. 2 are very specific, and actually 1 is specific and 2 are a little broader, but we were talking about characters. Chris Evans is perfect in this. I loved the skateboarding scene because it brought me back to Tony Hawk Pro Skater. I don't know if you ever played that, but that's all it was. But it was nice to sort of realize, like, yeah, Fantastic Four was 2004, 2006, and this was 2010 before Captain America took off. But like, this guy is a comic book guy, and he's been doing this. He gets it. He loves it, and he's really good at it.
And he's including this is in so many comic book movies, and he is great in all of them. The Losers, Fantastic Four, Scott Pilgrim, Deadpool and Wolverine, the entirety of the MCU. He can do no wrong if you put him in a comic book, and he goes all in every time.
Totally. I was very pleasantly surprised at Brie Larson. I do not hide behind the fact that I didn't like that movie. I don't like Captain Marvel. We talked about that in episode 5, but I love her in this film. And I love that she sings. And from now on, I will be calling her Captain Voldemarvel, because she is she who must not be named.
Oh, yes. And this, by the way, is what Envy looks like in the comic. Did a pretty good job.
Not bad.
Yeah.
Not bad. Second, where's the sequel? Like, where's the sequel? We need a sequel here.
Okay, so this kind of leads, well, my opinion on that leads into my bad a little bit. So
I only have one more thing.
I'll comment on that once we move into the bad stuff.
One more thing is I loved the Easter egg references. I don't know if you caught it, but every time one of the X's shows up, their number is somewhere in the background. And that is so Edgar Wright.
I didn't.
I caught something you didn't?
I did not know that. That's awesome, though.
Every single time, it's the number. Like when Evans shows up, it's number 2. When Patel shows up, there's number 1. And it just flows throughout, and you just start seeing it as you're going through, and you're like, I think an X is coming.
Oh, I like that. Well, I'm gonna have to go back and find some of the scenes of the X's. That's awesome.
That is the end of my good.
Amazing.
Because you hit everything. But why don't we take a break? Let's hear from our sponsor of today's episode, and we'll be back in a flash.
See you soon. So, you just met the one, and you discover you have to fight all their exes to be with them. Not to worry. We here at I'm So Sad Martial Arts Studios, we are ready to get you in fighting shape, just in case you don't get that extra life bonus. Here at Isthmus, we don't want you to think about death and get sad and stuff when you can feel at full health and get ready to face down your enemies. So if you're in Lesbians with the one true love, don't waste another minute. Get started today and feel ready for the future, like with jetpacks. Sign up today. Disclaimer, vegans may be asked about their opinions on chickens.
Here at Isthmus.
Isthmus. I didn't want to keep saying the I'm So Sad Martial Arts Studio.
Would have been funny if you called it Me So Sad.
Miss.
Yeah.
Miss.
Miss. Hilarious.
Yeah, it was all right.
No, it's good.
It was just
It's
filled with. I just wanted to fill it with the references.
the deep cuts. Totally.
I'm in lesbians with you. Oh, I said lesbians.
Oh, man. There is some bad things with this movie
Okay, I'm gonna go first because
because you'll be done in a minute.
I have almost nothing bad to say about
Okay.
this.
I don't know how, but
I have almost nothing.
we're going to fight and I will defeat you.
I got one too. Don't
All
worry.
right. Okay. For bad, we will fight, and whoever has the most points at the end will win.
Oof. Now, do I get points for like discrediting any of the bad you say?
All right. So let's set some terms right now. You
All
get
right.
points if you discredit, and you get points if you change the other person's mind. And I think because you're making a point, that's a point, right? So like if you say this movie's too long, all right,
That's a point, but if you explain to me why it was the perfect length and I say, "Oh, you're right, then it really was a good length," you get the point.
correct.
Got it. Love
So
it. All
essentially,
right.
we're getting points. You have to undo the points.
Yes. Got it.
It's like podcast asteroids.
Got it.
Here we go.
So what are you using? Atari? I got
Yeah.
N64.
Yep. Here we go.
All right, so here we go. Because it was the last thing we talked about in the good, there is 6 Scott Pilgrim books. All right. They did the movie is very faithful to them, but there is so much story that's not covered. There was so much more preparation that Scott goes through between each evil X. There was more to his relationship with Ramona and with the band wanting to be signed, and with Ramona dealing with her past, with all the stuff with Knives and young Neil. There was so much more. Oh, and Envy Adams. There's way more about her, which is terrific in the book. So I don't know if it needed a sequel. I think it would be hard to do a sequel, but I think that there should have been more of them to kind of get the full story.
I surrender because that's one of my bad. How is he a great fighter? Like, he's in between jobs. He's in a band, but he can give Goro and Johnny Cage a run for their money. Like, what is going on?
Okay, so that's one of my other bads, is that no one acknowledges that Scott is the best fighter. That's acknowledged in the book, that he's an incredible fighter. And then my last bet, they kind of all connect now. I didn't even write them that way, but they kind of connect. My last bad is, you wouldn't think that about Michael Cera. So I don't know. He did a great job. I'm not saying I dislike him in the movie, but
No.
Michael Cera is Michael Cera in everything. Now, his
Yes.
personality and his cadence, his voice even, worked for the character of Scott, but I don't think that you got the same impression when it came to the fighting as you would a different young actor. You know what I mean? I even think that the kid who plays young Neil would have been a better Scott, because I would have bought him fighting, or Wallace. I would have bought him fighting. Pretty much any of the other male characters, I would have bought
anybody other than
the
Cera.
fighting stuff. Michael Cera did great at the awkwardness because he is awkward. So he does awkward perfectly. But
yes.
he's an awkward guy, so you like, that doesn't even seem like acting when he's super uncomfortable about breaking up with Knives, telling Ramona he loves her, fighting the exes. But there was more to the story that they should have done.
So I'm going to give you all 3 of those points. Yours. Not here to discredit any of them. In addition, I don't like Michael Cera.
Like as an actor or in this movie?
Just in this movie. I don't buy him. Now, I will throw the disclaimer out there that I don't know the source material the way that you do. But halfway through the movie, I'm like, no, I like the world. I like what's going on. I just don't like him. Like, it should have been Andrew Garfield or Anton Yelchin or Tom Holland or Noah Schnapp from Stranger Things. Like, you need a Peter Parker character, and Cera isn't it.
Well, bear in mind, this was also 15 years ago, so you have to think of who would have been, that
Sure.
age and that
Yeah.
big at the time to be able to carry, kind of a weird
Yeah.
movie like this too.
Maybe he's one of the only ones that could have done it.
Hmm.
And, right time, right place, all of that. But walking away, loving this the way that I do, Sarah's just not it for me.
Yeah, I think knowing the source material and loving both the source material and the movie, I can give you at least half of that point from my perspective. I didn't think he was bad, but it could have been
All
better
right.
with him.
All right. So Joey got a 0.5. Good to know.
Yay.
Yay.
Yay
All
for
right.
you.
So you're done with your bad. That's it?
That's it.
It's time to level up, son.
All right, let's go. Fight!
He's dating a high schooler, and the reason that that's an issue in this movie is because she's clingy? Wrong, sir. Wrong.
Well, that's the issue for who? That's
what Scott says.
Yeah, that's his issue, but for everybody else, it's the fact that she's a high schooler because they never let that go.
Yep, and it's ugh. Like, even when it came out, I was like, no, that's not right.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole point is that she's still in high school, and have you met Scott's high school girlfriend?
No. Ugh.
Also, I think if I have a daughter in the future, I'm gonna name her Knives.
Knives is a great name.
Yeah, hopefully Marissa won't hear this because that will never ever
happen.
But I just want it to happen because it's cool.
A nickname. I'd say that's a point, wouldn't you?
I mean, I'll give you the point that Scott should have had a bigger issue that she was in high school. Yeah, so.
All right, let's talk about Ramona,
the manic pixie dream girl.
Madam,
be careful what you say about
herself.
Ramona. I love Ramona.
All right, Ramona would never be into a guy like him. She's like, even if she's looking for a nice guy and needs a change of pace, it ain't Scott. So the whole premise just doesn't work from like, okay, here's your list of people you've dated, and now you're going to go to this guy because he bothered you while you were Amazon delivering? Like, it doesn't work.
Okay, so yes, but
I heard yes.
But Book Scott is a little different. Book Scott.
Okay, go ahead.
She's Book Scott. It's more believable. He's still weird, but he's cooler than in the movie. So Book Scott makes sense, but Book Scott makes more sense than movie Scott.
Half a point I will take.
Half a point I'll give you, but she also has very weird taste in exes. Like her 7 exes, they are of all different races, ages, genders.
Hey, don't take away my point.
Personalities.
That's one of my issues.
I'm just saying that could be, who's to say who she's into? There's not a whole lot of consistency if you run down the line of the people she's been with.
Exactly. She's a schizophrenic or she's got a personality disorder. Like, there is absolutely no reason that these 7 people should be her exes. There's just not.
But you're right. Again, I think that everything can be boiled down to the problem of yeah. I think everything can be boiled down to the problem that there was so much more in the books because there's more explanation other than, it was a phase. They were from high school. Right. I was really lonely at the time. This was my experimental phase. Like, they're just kind of casually thrown away lines, but the books go into much bigger detail as to why, why Gideon had such a hold on her, why she was so attracted to, Chris Evans' character,
Sure.
So again, I feel like a lot of your bad could be boiled down to the fact that there's so much more information in the books.
From here on out, let's categorize that and not get additional points because it's not going to be fair because I've got a couple more. But if it's just like in the book, it's different and the movie didn't do this well.
Okay.
We won't penalize for that. But at the same time, you can't just use that.
No. I will only use it if it's a for real thing. But again, I think you're right. You wouldn't think Ramona would be into Scott, but this version of Scott, she would. So that's
right,
why
here
it's
you
a
go.
little...
Put your blaster up. Here's a question.
Start.
How does she know about the 7 evil X's? How do you like me now? Bang, bang. There's a point.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
And the other thing, this is a separate thing. You know the party scene when everybody's like getting introduced to her? She's like the most awesome girl. She's so cool. Aubrey Plaza is like, don't ruin this, Scott. She's at my party. She's the coolest person here. No, she's not. She's literally standing against the wall talking to no one. So how does everybody know about her?
I think that's what makes her cool, because she's a what do you call it? A
Loser.
Well, she's very aloof, but she's foreign, because she's not from Canada. She's from America. She's from the United States. That's crazy. You know, something different, something new, something exotic. So I think that's what makes her super cool.
You know what? Defeated. Yes, you're right. Okay, that's enough about Ramona. Let's talk about continuity.
Okay.
How is Scott getting an email from X number 1 when he hasn't even asked Ramona out yet?
OMG video games?
Yep. There's a point. I am keeping track here. The fight between Scott and Roxy does not count. It totally doesn't count, one, because he's not fighting her.
Yeah.
And they probably did that. This bothers me, but I'd like your thoughts on it. Maybe you know. It bothers me because, like we talked about, just shoving a social issue in there where it's like, oh, look, we're edgy and we're aware of non-heterosexual relationships, but then the rules of the fight don't work because they didn't want Scott to hit a girl. It bothered me because it was like, you're trying to say something. It's fine that you're saying something, but the story is now sacrificed because you want to say something.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't remember which volume.
Is it in the books?
Oh, it is in the books, but I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't remember which volume has that fight in it. So I don't remember if he fights her but I'm pretty sure Ramona fights her in the book as well. But I think that him specifically saying, I can't hit a girl, I don't want to fight a girl, is a little like with that. I'll give you that point.
Cool. Every person in this movie is a horrible garbage person.
Oh, yeah, for the most part, everybody's terrible.
There is no one morally guided except Knives. Knives is cool, but that's because she's young.
She's young and naive. Yeah, she's young and naive. Everybody else is pretty awful.
Garbage people.
Like they're all nice because they're Canadian, but
right.
Everyone is very morally ambiguous when it comes to their relationships, their careers, their stepping on other people to get where they need to go. Yeah.
And the last thing I have is one line at the very end of the movie, which is, "You broke the heart that broke mine." Who cares?
Yes.
Who cares?
I mean, I think you're thinking too hard about it.
No, but you moved on. You got broken up with, and now you're gonna yell at the guy who broke up with her because it's like, what?
Well, that shows how much she still loves him, because she, I still, he broke up with me, but I still love him, and he left me for you, and then you had the gall to break his heart. Now I'm gonna fight you because you didn't even make him happy. You broke his heart,
But to do what? To get back with him? Is she supposed to show her loyalty and chivalry and blah blah blah? Like that makes no sense. There was no other way to get her into the frame. There was no other way that she could enter the scene other than a terrible line, and it's awful and it makes no sense.
You're overthinking. If that's all the bad you have,
no point there.
If that's all the bad you have,
I just wanted to say it.
I feel like there wasn't a whole lot of you couldn't find a whole lot of negative.
But I did get more points than you.
Well, that's because I didn't have a lot of bad, because I should get a...
Let's talk spiritual stuff. You could be anywhere at any time, doing anything, and millennials around the world could sing that together.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, pretty much every song
Yep.
from the Mario franchise, all the
Oh my
music.
gosh. I'll kick off spiritual stuff.
All right, do it.
There was a great line very end of the movie, and it says, "You can defeat me, but can you defeat yourself?" And I think in life we often dream of vanquishing villains. You know, these external obstacles that stand in our way, these things that we face with our goals, our personal development, our relationships, all of that. And these are these bad guys that we love to easily identify. You know, sometimes it's a difficult family member, it's a challenging work situation, it's the other political party, it's Darkseid.
No,
it's fill in the blank.
You lost points just now.
I'll take one away. But the true battle is not external. It is always internal. The hardest battles that we face, I think, are against ourselves. It is our pride. It is our fears. It is our insecurities, our doubts, and even our sin. And Paul talks about this in the book of Romans. You got me on it from the last episode. I started going through Romans, and he's got this brilliant back and forth. He's sort of like verbally processing in chapter 7. And in verses 15 through 20, he goes, I don't understand what I do. For what I want to do, I don't do. But what I hate, I do. For I have the desires to do what is good, but I can't carry it out. For I do not do the good I want to do, but the evil I do not want to do, this I keep doing. And he's explaining this internal struggle, this internal battle, this daily war with ourselves, between our desires and between God, who calls us to something greater. And I think it's easier to sort of see life in these black and white terms of the good guy, the bad guy, the villain out there, the man who's putting us down, all of this, than to confront our own brokenness and our own struggle. Because, you know, I'll speak from personal experience. I know this is true for you as well. Fighting yourself requires humility. It requires self-awareness, and it's a ton of work.
Yeah.
But Paul keeps going at the end of that chapter in verses 24 and 25. He goes, what a wretched man that I am. Who will rescue me from this body that is subject to death? Thanks be to God who delivers me through Christ Jesus our Lord. And the hope that I took out of this movie and this particular scene is that victory is available over ourselves, over our willpower. But it's not through just trying harder or power-ups or extra lives or self-determination. You know, it comes through surrender to Jesus. It comes through Jesus giving us the strength to confront those flaws and to face ourselves. It's the Holy Spirit that empowers us to choose humility over pride, to choose forgiveness over bitterness, and to choose love over fear. And so, you know, every day we're going to face that villain in the mirror. That's the first villain we got to face. But through God's grace in Jesus, we have victory over that.
That's great. Yeah, facing yourself is probably the biggest challenge you'll face. You know, facing the negative version of yourself, you know, who you don't want to be. Now, do you think that it should end the way kind of the movie ends, where, you know, yeah, we were just hanging out. He's actually, you know, a pretty nice guy. We kind of worked everything out. Or do you think you need to really defeat the negative side of you in order to really move forward?
I think it's actually somewhere in between. I don't think you ever defeat it, and I don't think you befriend it. I think a lot of people, particularly in our generation, have found excuses for their behavior. You know, it's, well, this is just the way I am, and this is this, and this is that. And instead of doing the work towards battling yourself, you've now given yourself a free pass as to why you don't have to do that work. But I think the tension and the ongoing spiritual journey is that you hold both of those together, saying, I'm aware of who I am and I will fight it. I may never defeat it this side of eternity, but I'm not giving in.
Okay. So it's like balancing the force.
Yeah, it's balancing the video game mushroom.
Yes.
Pudding.
Wow, 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 wow.
What'd you find?
Mine was more focused on Scott and Ramona and their relationship. These are two people that met and they fell in love and they realize they want to be together, but they can't let go of their past. Scott has a hard time with letting go of knives, but also letting go of the hurt that he suffered and the trauma he has from being with envy. Ramona has, seven evil exes that she can't seem to escape from, and, has excuses as to, like, here's why I was with this one, here's why I was with that one.
Mm.
And, Scott has to fight them all before he can be with her. Scott also has to deal with his past with knives and envy in order to be with Ramona. So in order to move forward, he has to let go of his past, which he won't do. And so does she. We can't move forward in our faith if we're dwelling on the past. If we're constantly thinking about the fact that, like, here are these things I did that make me, unworthy of, God's love. Here are ways that I, tried to do the right thing and didn't or couldn't or chose not to. All of these things, shouldn't let me move forward. Isaiah talks about, not dwelling on the past. The past is the past. You need to move forward. You need to focus on the present and to move forward in order for your faith to become what it's meant to be. And even the main villain of the movie says that, Gideon says to Scott, don't let what's past ruin your future.
Mm.
Don't let who you were define entirely who you can become and who you are now. If Scott wanted a relationship with Ramona, he needed to just let go of the things that happened and be with her. And that's the same thing for us with Jesus. If we want to follow Christ and we want to have this relationship with Jesus, we need to repent. We need to, like, understand that there are things we did that are not good. There are ways that we were and decisions we made that didn't work out well, but we need to live in the now and in the future. We can't dwell on what that was, because that will always hold you back from being able to move forward in anything, but especially in your faith.
Nailed it. Nailed it. Now, you asked a
Ding.
question. I'll ask a question.
Go for it.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how easy is that to do?
Like 1 being the easiest, 10 being the hardest.
Yeah.
12.
I knew you'd say that.
I mean, for me personally, it's taken, trust in, people. It's taken certain people in my life to kind of lead me out of different situations. It's taken therapy. It's taken prayer. It's taken, falling down and having to get back up again. So it is not easy to let go of your past, whether that's spiritual, relational, whether it's things you did or things that were done to you. It's definitely not easy, and it definitely can be one of the hardest things to do. But in order to move forward, you have to know that, like, listen, did that help shape who I am now? And are there things that I can use it for? Absolutely. But in order to move forward with my life and with my faith and with my relationships and with my future, I got to move on and I got to let it go, because it can't define who I am. It can inform who I am and what I've learned, but it can't define who I am.
I was just going to say that, and you wrapped it up perfectly. And speaking of wrapping it up, you want to rate this?
I do, and you are not going to be happy. You might even take all my points away, but I love...
No, your points are your points. They
All
are
right.
what they are. Go ahead.
I love this movie. I love this movie.
Yeah.
I love the source material. I think it's so much fun. I'm not even a big video game guy, and I still think it's great. I am going to give this a Conroy.
What?
It's not completely flawless. As we said, there are definitely things it has wrong with it, but there is not one part of the movie that I would really change. It's fun. It's a good length of time. It's a blast. Everybody knows what they're getting into. Everybody is fully on board with it. It's a great watch, and it's a great movie, as you are the prime example, to introduce new players to. So That
Conroy.
it is
My goodness.
it is an almost perfect movie.
You don't just throw that out there.
I don't. So you take it seriously. That shows you that I mean it.
Clearly you do. I did not give it a Conroy. I gave it a Bale. Because it's good. It's so fun. It is not issue free. Like we said, it was new to me, but I loved that I didn't need an origin story to enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
The more I thought about it, the more I start scratching my head at moments. But given the world that we live in and the fact that I need levity on a daily basis, it brought me back to a time of carefree punk rock music and arcade games. It's a Bale. It's very good.
All right. Listen. I'm fully accepting of a Bale, but for me, it's got a bigger piece of my heart.
I wonder what our arcade fans think.
I can't wait to hear about it. I mean,
I'd love to.
we've got friends who are deep into video game lore, comic book lore. This kind of takes all of it together.
We've got manga fans, we've got Chris Evans fans, we've got Kieran Culkin fans. Now, who would have thought that guy would have made a resurgence?
I mean, you went from the weird little bedwetting cousin in Home Alone to, somebody that everybody needs in their life.
I don't want to sleep with Fuller. He wets the bed.
Everybody needs a Wallace. And then yet we have Scott sleeping in the bed with Fuller.
Full circle. Leave us a comment on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you guys so much for listening to the show. And take us out of here. Player 2.
All right. Well, listen, as this game comes to an end, remember, kids, if no one knows your band, all your shows are secret shows. We'll see you next time. Game over.
We don't use the E word in this house. There were so many one-liners that I actually wrote down. Hey, you totally came. He punched the highlights out of her hair.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Being vegan just makes you better than most people. Did you learn that at Vegan Academy?
Vegan Academy, yeah. You know what bums me out a little bit is that I won't be able to see any of the graphics as we're doing this.
Same here.
Because I'm almost like, I wonder when we're going to see oh, that's all in editing. Crap.
Uh-huh.